So I have my whole life been a type A kind of person. My mom jokes that I was born early so that I could get out and start running everything. I was a bit overcommitted to school and work and projects and whatever it was that I was supposed to be doing. And that served me well for a long time. It got me through 2 graduate degrees and some demanding jobs, and then I had kids, and I sort of approached that the same way. A lot of extra things to do and manage. And when I was in my chaplaincy internship that's required to become a minister, I just remember railing against the concept of pastoral care, which might sound funny coming from a minister. What's the point? What are we doing? I used to ask my supervisor. And he would just repeatedly say, you just be there. That just didn't seem like enough. And through all of that doing and doing and doing, my body gave out. I would describe the last 5 years as an incredibly painful lesson in how to stop and rest. My body, which I have shared before, has struggled with chronic illness my entire life, finally told me that it could not keep going at such an unsustainable pace. I didn't have a choice. It was rest or collapse, which is not the most enlightened way to learn that spiritual lesson, but there we are. So I'll come back to that spiritual lesson again in a few minutes. As we shift gears each month into a new focus, this month, April, Mike mentioned, our theme is Rise Up. It has an exclamation point. Rise Up. No, we don't have it on there. It's on your order of service. The subtitle is Religious Perspectives on Resistance. Mike is right that we are focusing on resisting forces of dehumanization, forces of injustice, anything that destroys the capacity for love and for wholeness. That is what we are resisting. Unitarian Universalism and our predecessor faiths, Unitarianism and Universalism, we have a very long name, have long heritages of resisting injustice. Unitarians and Universalists have supported the women's right to vote, provided a place of welcome and celebration for LGBTQ folks, both in our congregations and in our ministry since the 80s, supporting voting rights, marching with Dr. King at Selma, supporting indigenous neighbors at Standing Rock and in other fights against the degradation of sacred land, supporting safe access to abortion. I could keep going. But supporting justice is a part of the mission of our faith. It's embedded in what we do and who we are, because we believe that hell is real only here on this earth, in the way that we create structures that keep people from their full potential. And we want to eliminate that kind of hell. It's our version of salvation, saving each other and our earth from the hell of injustice. And as a pluralistic faith tradition, we honor that we can and we should learn from the world's religions in this work. And so this month, we will explore the ways that different religious traditions approach this work of resistance and justice making. So as a preview, today we're looking at Judaism through the lens of Passover. Next week, Christianity through the lens of Easter. On the 16th, 2 of our wonderful fellowship members will enlighten us to the power of engaged Buddhism. In honor of Earth Day on the 23rd, we will hear from a Menominee Nation elder about Native American resistance to environmental injustice. And then on the final Sunday of the month, the 30th, we'll hear from a Milwaukee-based Muslim leader about her environmental justice making from an Islamic perspective. Additionally, there are a few other important events happening to focus on justice this month. Among them, I want you to mark your calendar and join us on Thursday, the 27th, for Madison Action Day. We will be joining others from Esther, which is our local interfaith organizing group, and Wisdom, our statewide interfaith organizing group, to discuss our values with our legislators in Madison. It's a really important day, so I hope you can make it. A couple days later, on Saturday the 29th, Reverend Hannah has been working to put together a community-wide event called Rise Up to bring together both people here at the fellowship and in the wider community, people who are doing justice work, maybe informally or formally, maybe through their paid work, maybe in their free time, or any of you who just want to learn about what that means can come and be a part of this event. It's going to be a wonderful day to get to know people, both within and beyond our congregation, for the sake of improving our community. So I hope you can be there. And I know that all of this, even writing it out, it sounds like a lot. It's making me a little tired just thinking about it. I'm going to grab one of those blankets. But you don't have to do it all. Just find what it is that feeds your spirit and do that. Which brings me to today. Today, we are taking lessons from the Jewish tradition. Mike mentioned this coming week, Wednesday at sundown, begins the festival of Pesach, or Passover. And here is just a little background on that, if you're not familiar. The Jewish tradition holds that there was a time in their history that for generations they were an enslaved people in the land of Egypt, forced to labor in harsh conditions. The prophet Moses was abandoned by his mother in an incredibly loving way in a river to avoid a mass killing of Jewish baby boys by the murderous Pharaoh. But he was rescued by the Pharaoh's daughter and raised in the Pharaoh's own household. And when he realized his Jewish heritage and identity, he accidentally killed an Egyptian slave master and then, fearing retribution, ran away to the desert. It was there that God revealed God's self to Moses in a burning bush, telling Moses that he would be the one to deliver his people, the Israelites, from bondage. Moses was not thrilled about that news. Can you imagine being told you have to do this? It was a long and dramatic story involving God sending 10 plagues of increasing destruction to the land of Egypt to try to convince Pharaoh to free the Jewish people. And at each turn, Pharaoh would refuse. Finally, the last plague was to send the angel of death to take the firstborn son of each Egyptian family, which broke Pharaoh's will, and the Israelites were able to escape to the Red Sea, where Moses' staff parted the waters and allowed them to flee across the sea. The night before, when the Jewish people learned that their freedom was imminent, they were instructed to paint the blood of a lamb over their door so that the angel would pass over their home, sparing their children, which is why this time is called Passover. Now, it's a heartbreaking story of dictators, slavery, death, and escape. But the Jewish people celebrate this story in honor of their freedom, of what happened next. And they celebrate with a Passover meal called the Seder, which I mentioned earlier. It consists of very specific ritual foods that recall the elements of the story. It's a very sensory-rich retelling. There are special prayers and songs, eating and drinking, and it's all written out in a guide called the Haggadah. And if you Google it, I challenge you to Google the Haggadah, you will find a wide range of Haggadahs out there. There are some that are 2 minutes long, which is a joke because you can't really do the whole Haggadah in 2 minutes, and more traditional ones that are much longer. There are ones for observant or conservative Jewish families. There are more modern retellings of the Haggadah. It's very fascinating. But each one has they all have certain elements. The Seder plate holds the ritual foods in particular places. It allows Jews to not only hear the story, but feel it, taste it, touch it, including things like parsley, which is then dipped into salt water to symbolize the initial flourishing of the Jewish people in Egypt, and then the tears of slavery. There's also charoset, which is a mixture of apples and nuts and cinnamon, which symbolizes the mortar that the Israelites were forced to use in their building and their slave labor. But then when you eat the charoset, it is the sweetness of freedom. One of the elements of the Haggadah involves the youngest child, the youngest one who is able to read, asking 4 ritual questions, and an elder answering those 4 questions. And each one has to do with why this night is different from all other nights, and why they do what they do on this Seder night. And it always answers back to the slavery and the freedom. And the most intriguing question for me is the one that I want us to consider as we think about rising up against injustice. And it is the final of the 4 questions. Why, on all other nights, do we sit or recline, but on this night we only recline? Another way I have heard this question is, why on this night do we slouch? Of course, in modern times, most people sit at a table, a dining table for the Passover Seder. They aren't really reclining or slouching, but the question remains. And the answer is, because in ancient times, free people slouched or reclined while they ate, and only the servants or slaves stood. So this is an image of how Romans or Greeks, and presumably Egyptians, would dine. It seems like a very inefficient way to eat, on your belly like that. I don't know. But Mike and I were discussing this. We decided if you've had one too many, maybe that you can just lay down. That's how it worked. But you can see that the people are enjoying their time. They're eating all their food while they're relaxing and lounging around, and it's the servants who are up entertaining them or serving them. So why do we slouch? Because we are free. Because we are free. So today, our nation does not literally enslave anyone, although we do have a long and sordid history of the enslavement of African people and their descendants. And today, there are indeed some forms of slavery that exist in shadowy places. But for most of us, the bondage that we find ourselves in is to the forces of dehumanization that Mike was speaking about, those forces that exploit humans for our production. Workers forced to labor in multiple low-wage jobs, people choosing between rent payments and medication, work that refuses to allow families enough time with their newborn babies, humans reduced to their market value in jobs that take away all of their free time, the destruction of natural resources to continually extract for profit. These are just a few examples of that bondage that we currently find ourselves in. And of course, when we consider those things, when we become aware of them, we want to rise up. We want to fight against these forces. But how? How do we rise up against forces that insist that our work is our only value? And that, my friends, is the hard lesson that I had to learn that I mentioned earlier. The only way to resist an extractive economy that places all of human value in our production is to rest. Why do we slouch? Because we are free. And this is also the lesson that Tricia Hersey learned in 2013 when overwork threatened her collapse while she was in seminary. She is the founder of the Nap Ministry and is referred to often as the Nap Bishop. Here's a picture of Tricia Hersey, and I think it is a badass picture of Tricia Hersey. Look at her there. Don't you want to be her on that bed? Her site says, quote, "This is more than about naps. This is more than about naps. I took to rest and naps and slowing down as a way to save my life, to resist the systems telling me to do more, and most importantly, as a remembrance to my ancestors who had their dream space stolen from them. She continues, this is more than about naps. It's more than about fluffy pillows or expensive sheets or silk sleep masks or any other frivolous consumerist gimmick. It is about a deep unraveling from white supremacy and capitalism. She says these two systems are violent. History tells us this, and our present living shows this. Rest pushes back and disrupts a system that views human bodies as a tool for production and labor. It is a counter-narrative. We know that we are not machines, we are divine. End quote. And Hersey draws from a long heritage of Black liberation theology to ground her work. She cautions against referencing the Nap ministry or its message that rest is revolutionary, which is the title of her book, without first grounding it in the scholarship of Black liberationists. The systems of extraction that we're talking about today were built upon the bodies of Black and brown people in our culture. And now, those systems play on all of us. It's true that still today, people of color are the ones most at risk of the kinds of exhaustion, both physical and spiritual, that Hersey strives to liberate in her ministry. And we can all learn a lesson from the Nap bishop and refuse to be a part of a system that makes machines of any of us. And this is true not only in paid work. It's true in parenting or caregiving. It's true in creative work. It's true in justice work. We are not our production. Our worth is not bound up in how many hours we spend in service to our families, working ourselves to the bone. We are not better creatives if our art is more lucrative than someone else. We are not more worthy if we run ourselves ragged working phone banks and writing postcards. As Audre Lorde once said, quote, "The master's tools will never dismantle the master's house." And trust me, I understand how hard this is for some of us. We have been so fully programmed by our society to believe that our work is the only way that we can contribute in meaningful ways to the world that it feels impossible to stop. What terrible things will happen if I do? I also honor that there could potentially be some privilege inherent in a message of rest. Not everyone gets paid vacation time or has time to relax when they're single parenting. But as Hersey says, this is not about long bubble baths or weeks on the beach. This is about finding ways to resist anything that makes machines out of us. And for some of us, that might just begin inside of our hearts. It also means that if we believe this message, if we believe that rest is resistance, then we will work against any forces that deprive our neighbors of the same rest that we know we deserve. The people of the Jewish diaspora, like the people of the African diaspora, have a history of enslavement and genocide. This Jewish commitment to the retelling of their freedom story every year, and the reminder that rest is a crucial hallmark of a free people, is one that we can all learn from. The way that Hersey has named through her powerful ministry of reclaiming the power of a nap. I've begun to learn this lesson as my own reclamation of my worth as a child of the universe, no less than the trees and the stars. I've begun to see my body as holy, as a powerful way to connect to all that is through my body, to all that I love. Without my body, I can't actively show that love. I can't resist injustice in the world. Without rest, my body is incapable of all of that. I have so much to offer this world, and so do you. You, too, are a child of the universe, created in the image of the divine. You are worthy. You are enough, just as you are. Your love is desperately needed in this world. And so, like the God of the Hebrew people who rested after he created the world, we also need to remember to rest as we are called to do so. It is good. It is good and holy work, and it is resistance to the oppressions of this world. Why do we slouch? Because we are free. Shalom. Amen. And may it be so.